it's a girl. Today, that answer can come in seconds. For most of human history, there was no way to know what determined a child's sex. So people guessed. They read the shape of a woman's belly. They blamed heat and food. They even believed the baby's position in the womb could determine the outcome. Some of these ideas were ancient. Others were presented as serious medical theories. But there was one problem. Nobody could prove any of them. By the beginning of the 20th century, scientists had started looking for an answer under the microscope. And the woman who would finally provide some of the strongest evidence had spent most of her adult life doing something completely different. She wasn't even a scientist yet. Nettie Stevens was born in Vermont in 1861, the daughter of a carpenter. She was an excellent student. But for a woman without money or connections, science was almost impossible to enter. So Stevens became a teacher. And she stayed one for years, saving what she could semester after semester toward the goal most people around her didn't understand. At 35, she finally had enough saved to enroll at Stanford. 4 years later, she began her PhD at Bryn Mawr. She was 39, starting a scientific career at an age when many of her future colleagues had already spent a decade building theirs. Her students remembered her as quiet, almost shy. One of them once hesitated to ask her a question, afraid she might be interrupting. Stevens was surprised. "How could you think your questions would bother me?" She had spent nearly 20 years waiting for a door into science to open. She had no idea it was about to open onto something this small, a beetle. By 1905, Stevens was doing laboratory work at Bryn Mawr. Her subject was not glamorous, it was a beetle, specifically the mealworm. She began examining its chromosomes, the tiny structures inside cells that carry genetic information. And she noticed something strange. The male beetles produced two kinds of sperm. Some carried a large chromosome, others carried a much smaller one. The females didn't. Every egg they produced carried the same kind. That meant the difference had to come from the sperm. Stevens kept comparing male offspring, female offspring, chromosome by chromosome, and the pattern kept holding. When the sperm carried the larger chromosome, the offspring developed female. When it carried the smaller one, the offspring developed male. It wasn't the mother's diet, it wasn't temperature, it wasn't anything about the mother at all. It was one chromosome inherited from the father that came in two forms. In 1905, Nettie Stevens had found the evidence that helped establish the chromosomal basis of sex determination. Stevens wasn't the only one looking for the answer. At Columbia, a well-connected zoologist named Edmund Beecher Wilson had been chasing the same question and leaning towards a different theory, one where the environment still played a role. He'd only studied male insects. Stevens studied both sexes, and that difference mattered. They published the same year. Wilson had actually read Stevens' manuscript first and endorsed it. Then he quietly revised his own paper, removed his environmental theory, and cited her work instead. Same year, same conclusion. Wilson's evidence was thinner and he knew it. But when the story of sex determination got told and retold in the decades after, it was mostly his name that survived. Not because he stole her work, not because she'd been wrong. Because credit doesn't always follow the strongest evidence, especially when one scientist works at a major university and the other works alone at a women's college. Most of the scientific establishment barely looked at. Historians eventually gave this pattern a name: the Matilda Effect. And Nettie Stevens is one of its clearest examples. In 1912, Bryn Mawr finally created something rare for the time: a full research professorship designed specifically for her. No more teaching, just the lab full-time for the rest of her career. She never got to start it. Nettie Stevens died the same year of breast cancer. She was 50 years old. Her former mentor, Thomas Hunt Morgan, wrote her obituary. In it, he wrote something that reads almost like a prediction. Miss Stevens had a share in a discovery of importance, and her name will be remembered for this. He was right about one thing: the discovery outlived her. He was wrong about how long it would take her name to catch up to it. For most of the 20th century, the science moved forward. In classrooms, in textbooks, in every biology course that mentioned the XY system, while her name mostly stayed out of the sentence. Today, X and Y chromosomes are basic biology. We learn them in school. We see them in every textbook. The idea that chromosomes determine sex is something most of us take completely for granted. In 1905, it wasn't obvious at all. It was a guess without proof. Nettie Stevens turned it into evidence and kept going. In just 11 years of research, she published 38 scientific papers. The discovery that started with a beetle in a small lab at a women's college became part of the foundation of modern genetics. She was buried in Westfield, Massachusetts, beside her father and stepmother. Her sister's ashes were placed there decades later. Her grave is quiet. Her discovery isn't. For thousands of years, people could only guess. Then, in 1905, a woman looked through a microscope at a beetle and found the answer. And now you know her name. If this is the first time you heard it, follow for the next woman history almost let slip through.